So I was talking to Wendy before today, and then I said that it's very nice to have a friendly symposium, but at the same time, I feel a bit worried to be too comfortable to talk and to be naive sometimes. So this is a proposal I was thinking about. I believe it will be more in the side of conceptual analysis, and I perhaps will try to focus both on serendipity and big data, or focus even more on serendipity and this concept in the light or with the background of big data analytics. So I invite you all to reflect with me on this informational approach to serendipity. But first of all, I would like to thank the collaborators. This picture was taken in a very hot summer, and it was just some of the people I'm working with, or we were working in a group. And I like this idea of thinking together. And I take all the responsibility for my talk today, but at the same time, my talk is just a result of thinking together with this, especially with Ettore that bought the idea of working with serendipity with me since last August, and Marionis and Mariana Broins that always support me, and financial financial support from FAPESP. Pec, please mute your mic. Yeah. So the objective of this presentation is to propose an informational approach to serendipity in the context of data-driven sciences in order to discuss epistemological implications of the extensive use of big data analytics to scientific discovery. And I thank the presenters for yesterday, so they provide lots of information that I can skip quickly on my talk. So the outline for the talk is, I will first start with a riddle. I will cast a mystery that we will think along the talk. And then I will introduce a very short story on serendipity and accident, because I know it's a symposium on serendipity, so we are aware of it, but perhaps some are not that aware of some interesting historical timeline. And then I will go to the propose and the process to try to understand this account of processual account to information. And then at the end, I will go back to the riddle and say something about big data, automation, and serendipity. So this is the riddle. So when we talk about information, and this group is studying information for a while now, there's different approaches that you can take on information. But one of them is represented by this quote from Bateson. He says that information is a difference, which makes a difference. But what is a difference, and why it must be a difference which makes a difference? So to help us understand better this riddle or this enigma, I'm bringing processual account of information to help us shed light to the concept of serendipity through Peircean pragmatism. So here's the very short story of serendipity. We know that Walpole, in the letter, he coined this concept serendipity, to which he refers of serendipity as making discoveries by accident and sagacity. And what is interesting here is that Walpole was very aware of this essay Bacon wrote on the wisdom of the ancients. And in this essay, Bacon says that Pan has this, can be represented in scientific practice or in the philosophical work as a sagacious experience and of the general knowledge of nature, which is often found, even by accident, to stumble upon such discoveries whilst the pursuit was directed another way. And what is interesting here, I bring, even though I didn't wrote here, it's a very much Silver's paper in 2015. He brought our attention to that while in modern philosophy, they were trying to understand the hidden causes of nature, the concept of accident or chance was a bit set aside. So it was just with Merton, that was a sociologist, that this concept came back to to light. And Merton will say that, as we talked yesterday, that we have these serendipity patterns that refer to a fairly common experience of observing unanticipated, anomalous, and strategic data, which becomes the occasion for developing a new theory or for extending an existing theory. And of course, if we know the concept of serendipity, we have at least two different approaches. One is more restricted, that it's when you look, you are searching, you find something while you're not looking for that something. And Merton thinks that this is too strict and he widens it. So, and this will, what Roberts will call pseudo serendipity. But what is interesting here is that Merton was inspired by Peirce, as Nisi said yesterday, of this role of surprise. In fact, that is the initial step of deductive reasoning. And by that, I believe it's not all the philosophers that were not interested in chance and accident, right? Peirce has a big deal with that, and he was recognized to tame chance, as Haeckel would say in his his work. So if you go to Peirce, he has a very interesting essay on the doctrine of necessity examined, that's the name. And in part 5, Peirce, in this essay, he's discussing the role of chance, and by contrasting with it with the mechanical philosophers, or the philosopher that thinks that the unexpected is just epistemological. It's something that we are not looking for, it's unexpected to us. But if we know all the laws that guides nature, we will not have anything surprising. And Peirce does not agree with that, because he thinks chance plays a fundamental role in the development of organization, but also in the development of scientific practice. And here's the quote I find very interesting. Peirce says, "I make use of chance chiefly to make room for a principle of generalization, or a tendency to form habits, which I hold has produced all regularities." So it's basically all regularities that can be very strong and crystallized in the laws of nature, but also other more soft kind of habits. They have this principle of generalizations that is fueled by chance. And he continues, "The mechanical philosopher leaves the whole specification of the world utterly unaccounted for, which is really nearly as bad as to boldly attribute it to chance." And then he continues, "I attribute it altogether to chance, it is true, but," and this is important, "to chance in the form of a spontaneity which is to some degree regular." So chance here, it has this potentiality, this creative potential that comes in and helps the development of regularities in this tendency of form habits. And Peirce says in his account of information that analogous to the increase of information in us, there is a phenomenon of nature that is development, by which a multitude of things come to have a multitude of characters, which have been involved in a few characters, in a few things. So I know that I started with the riddle, and I'm bringing this to clarify the riddle, but it looks like another riddle. But in few words, information here is being understood as this process of organization. It's like a conveyance of forms that has a kind of structure that guides action when you grasp information. To help, I was in our group, we always come with this idea of onion, that it's like if information was like an onion, it has one structure, but it's structured according to many layers. Each layer we can perhaps understand as a set of habits, and according to the degree where the habit is crystallized, we will have a different kind of layer in this onion. And scientific practice, it's basically trying to unveil the layers. And before I sleep yesterday, I was thinking about an example, and it just came to me. Imagine that this is a person you just met, right? It's a very simple example. This person is structured in many contexts, and we have the personality of the person, we have the background, we have the trauma of the person, we have the history. And when you meet this person, and it looks like this is structure as an onion. We have strong beliefs, and we have recently acquired habits, and we also have a context. And to know that person is to unveil the layers that structure it person. And what is it is important here to take into account two things. One, the very person or the very scientific object, depending on the subject matter, is dynamic. So we are trying to unveil the layers of the object, but the object is changing. And we also approach this object according to certain contexts. So we have this, we can know the object, but we have some limitations. This is why Peirce will, what he calls a fallibilism, that our beliefs and our laws are not the laws itself, but trying to understand the laws of nature, we may be wrong, right, as hypothesis. So having this idea of information in mind, I explore information, meaning and inquiry towards an informational approach to serendipity. And here's another example. It was in Brazil. They discovered this rock, as I know Pac like rocks. I love rocks as well. So it was like this kind of rock that it looks like a normal rock, but when you open it, it shows the structure.
It's agate, not a rock. Agate.
Okay.
It's a half precious stone, as we say in Dutch. Half edelsteen. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I say thank you. So anyway, when you open it, it was surprising to see a cook monster here. And then suddenly this hack acquired a lot more of value and money in the sense of costing more. So what is the information? So we have this, we're trying to unveil the layers of the object. And once we grasp this development that is a process, we acquire meaning because it helps us to guide action. And here is when Peirce states his pragmatic maxim that will say that the very element of the elements of every concept, and here concept, we can understand that this a representation of this structure, enter into the logical thought at the gate of perception, so and make their exit at the gate of purposive action. So we need two relational things here. We need the first difference, the gate of perception, but also an exit, the gate of purposive action. And whatever cannot show its passport at both those gates is to be arrested as unauthorized by reason. And here just to poke a little bit more on this difference that a map is not the territory. When Bateson was discussing a concept of information, the difference which makes difference, he says, what is it in the territory? He asks, what is it in the territory that gets onto the map? So what can we represent as this layer of the object? And he answers differences. It's exactly difference are the things that get onto the map. Of course, the concept of difference is very complicated and even abstract here. What is the difference depends on who is perceiving that difference in a sense. So, and how we represent knowledge depends on the difference that we see in the territory and the difference which is relevant for our action. So that will be meaningful information. And here I try to draw some diagrams to take you from this a bit abstract analysis of informations to towards the informational approach to serendipity. It's very hard to describe with words or even with diagrams, processual accounts. But I tried it here, inspired by Menon. So imagine when we have the environment and we have a system. A system is constrained by some, it depends on how you restrict the system, but the system is not an island, is also part integrated in the environment. So we have the system, and this system has some constraints that will help to see differences. So we have here a relational account between the first difference, that will be the perception of a difference, And also, according to the previous constraints of the systems, this difference may make a second difference. And this can, upon further research or further inquiry, feed back to the very environment. And here will be the ethical approach. So in the sense of serendipity, we can think about chance events out there. We have splitting everything, you sleeping on the wet floor, or even leaking things you were not supposed to leak because you misunderstood that. And here I can bring the example of sucralose. That's one of the best and my favorites. That it was a foreign researcher in a lab, and the PI asked, "Can you please test this compound?" And he heard, "Taste it." So it was like this misunderstanding that was accidental, right? Make this to taste something that he should have tested. And this was a difference when he tasted it. It was a difference, which makes a difference because just tasting it, he discovered that it was very, very sweet. So in other terms, we have here accident, and then the constraints we can call sagacity. And when we have a perception of a difference and you are able from your sagacity to input some sort of a relevance into this first difference, we will have the second difference that will be the difference that will guide your action. And as I said, the last symposium, for those who were there, we will have here, once you find some surprising fact, you have the starting of at least one inquiry, and the inquiry will be through abduction, deduction, and induction. But what is important here, as we were trying to say, or we were trying to understand the processual account, that this inquiry is just a fiber that makes these ropes, or they interwove within other inquiries. And here we can bring, I didn't have time to bring in this presentation, but we can explore the mechanisms for serendipity. So the theories that support this inquiry, or the networking, or the group you are in. So that it will be that the fibers that makes us able to unveil the dynamicity of and complexity of the scientific object. And here is just in the last symposium, they also asked me, but what is it? Is it the surprising, or the surprise, and the emotion of surprise needed to that? And I said, yes. But if you're trying to understand in a meta level of the logic of all this inquiry and this unveiling of a dynamic object, the emotion, as Percy says, can be considered merely the instinctive indication of a logical situation. And for those who were presenting yesterday, we can talk it later. It doesn't mean that this process is irrational, but it means that even rationality is part of our own instincts that enable us to unveil the aspects of nature. Okay, and in a meta level, we are trying to understand the serendipity on the light of informational approach. And I find this metaphor very interesting. It's like if the serendipity, we have in the literature, for instance, the round will say that serendipity is an ability, others will say that it's an event, and I'm arguing along with Copeland that it's a process. And when you say it's a process, it depends on time, because imagine that the serendipity in a meta level, when you're trying to understand through history of science if something is serendipitous or not, we have this retrospective property that we can just say that if it's serendipitous or not, if we analyze the whole and retrospectively. And it's like analyzing serendipity, here's the metaphor, is like if you are touching a cloth. And first we say that a human can distinguish different textures of the cloth. So we can distinguish discoveries by serendipity looking back, but not immediately, because she requires to move the fingers over the cloth, which shows that she's obliged to compare sensations of one instant with those of another instance. And so in this metaphor, it will be like if we have serendipity and we are touching upon it, it means we are analyzing all the events and all the, we can spot the agents that are, or they have the prepared mind to make the right observation at the right time, at the right context. So here is where I try to characterize the concept of serendipity in the light of informational account, in the light of the riddle that information is this process that involves a difference which makes a difference. So here, serendipity is an emergent property of the interrelationship between two things, right? It's a property that emerges when, first, we have accidental or chance events followed by the perception of an expected event. So it's the first difference, the surprising fact. And it's made by an adequate agent, prepared mind, or a community of agents. And second, the recognition of its relevance. It will be the second difference that may occur immediately or require further investigations by undertaking a correct abduction and satisfying the pragmatic maxim. Okay, with this characterization in mind, we ask, so big data analytics, can we automate serendipity? Can we induce serendipity? Can we program for serendipity? I don't need to go on this because we have a lot yesterday, but of course, if you're in doubt about big data, we can discuss it later. But what is important here is that with thousands of data out there, and with what Leonelli will call the data journeys, we can use and reuse the data for different purposes with different contexts. So we can decontextualize the data. And I asked, what will be the epistemological implications of take the data out of the context? What we are missing here is exactly if we need a context to better understand the structure of the layers. Remember the onion, the layers of information. We can recontextualize it, and we can reuse the data by integrating databases. And we also have a shift in a kind of modeling the data, but this we can discuss it later. I brought here the proposal of Raymond, but we may talk it later. We want to, I want to focus on the epistemology of value here. So how can we reuse the data, and what will be the value of the data? And can we automate a system that spot the value of the data for us? Well, I am arguing that a value must be understood as a second difference here. And I try to reshape the previous diagram, showing as the system. If we replace the system in the previous diagram, that could be a human or a community of humans with automated systems, machine learning, algorithm, or so on. So we can do that, and we can design the constraints to find the interesting patterns. But first of all, and the design here is external. So we will have first an external aim that fulfills a research that may be to answer a previous questions. And then the algorithm or the modeling, nowadays we have these very interesting models that they react very fast to the data. So they collect the data that is generated, and each second a lot of data from the environment. And then we have these automated processes once the data are structured, and we may find the correlational patterns. And these correlational patterns may lead the algorithm to flag as the first interesting difference. And in this first flag, we have here the first difference that is an emergent product from the gathering of the data that is coming, and also the running of the design of the algorithm. And this can first answer a previous question from the research. So this is the red arrow here, but it also can generate it as a surprising fact. But what I understand is that this second surprising fact, it's just a second difference. So the relevance, it must be spotted by a human or a community of humans that may lead to further inquiry, that may lead to change the environment. So I brought here two examples that uses serendipity and natural language processing. First one is very old one. I talked about it last time. It's precisely 20 years ago. That is this recommender systems in a way that tries to induce serendipity by simulating these two phases, so the preparation phase and the incubation time. They use natural language processing to mine the texts they receive to change it with WordNet and Syntax and all this technical stuff, the websites, and then to give a feedback to the users. So they try to find the first difference, to flag a website that may be interesting to the user, that will say that if it's valuable or not, if it makes a second difference from the user. And a second example, it's very recent. It's from 2020, so last year. And it's an algorithm called, it's a machine learning application and called Serendipity. And I believe PAC will be very upset because it calls serendipity, but it's definitely pseudo serendipity, because it is an algorithm to find new drug uses. So inspired by when you need to repositioning of drugs, they try to find interesting patterns in social media that help researchers to spot new good effects and unknown and unexpected effects of common use drugs. So automating serendipity, as I was saying earlier, I believe that if we understand serendipity as a process that involves many things, and agents and institutions and algorithms, we can take it, algorithm, as a part of our extended mind that helps us to better find patterns. But by itself, it doesn't tell us much. Even this algorithm I just showed you, serendipity, they can spot patterns according to the authors, but if the patterns are relevant or not, it must be done manually. So in a sense, it can help to filter interesting patterns, but it cannot spot if that filtered difference will make a difference. So to come back, serendipity perhaps can be understood as an emergent property of the interrelationship between. So it's the same, but the red, I added the red here. Accident, chance events followed by the perception of an unexpected event. So will be the first difference, by an adequate agent or a community of agents, or an algorithm which find correlational association among variables. And so the recognition of its relevance, the second difference that may occur immediately or require further investigation. So my final remarks here. What will be the epistemological implications of the extensive use of big data analytics to scientific discovery? Well, if we understand serendipity as this process that may encompass new methods of thinking and doing science, we can understand that it can help the uncover of the layers that may be unexpected. So I just end here with saying that we should welcome serendipity within scientific practice by not blocking the way of inquiry. So, and I took advantage of this well-known quotation to say that chance not favors only prepared minds, it favors the prepared institutions that welcome diversity, interdisciplinarity, and freedom, allowing ideas to flourish. So please do not block the way of inquiry and just let chance in. Thank you.